Hello, my name is Emily and welcome to the audiovisual commentary for my animation, Morrigan. I hope you enjoy it. So this film took a year to make, and it was the conclusion to my degree in computer animation arts. And the theme at its heart is Celtic mythology.
Once, centuries ago, there lived
The first thing you probably noticed about the film is the odd environmental art style. In this next clip I'll show you exactly what inspired it.
Little did anyone suspect the young woman.
Initially I looked into fairy tales, paper cutouts, some black and white drawings and shadow puppets, even a BBC ident from a few Christmases back. But what inspired me the most were animations. Firstly, The Secret of Kells. Now this was also based on Celtic mythology, but it used really striking colours and shapes like stained glass windows, and it even interwove the Celtic knotwork into their designs. Secondly was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, in particular the Tale of the Three Brothers scene. It had a highly exaggerated style set with really fantastic contrast and silhouettes, really simple colour schemes, either black and white or sepia, which is what I wanted to take on, as you can see in the next scene.
A goddess of battle and strife.
I've always been quite proud of this particular scene because I couldn't quite believe how well the crows would fly around Morrigan and obscure her enough that she could vanish quite legitimately without making it too obvious. Now we introduce the hag. She was the first character to be finalised in 2D, and her cloak provided some very interesting challenges. So here's the hag in her original 2D form, but as you can see the original shape was really quite sort of pointed and it wouldn't really obey gravity, so I had to compromise when I reached Maya. So I made the cloak with dynamic intentions, so everything that's black on that mesh would move with gravity, but everything that was painted white would stay solid, and this helped the cloak to stay with the hag's wrists when she moved her arms, but it also meant that I could keep that pointed shape in the cloak's hood. And it meant that in the grand scheme of things, though the shape wasn't exactly the same, there's a really nice compromise between realistic movement and the original 2D design work.
The end of those who displeased her. Other times, she would appear as herself, aiding those.
This scene's always been quite a nice one in that it very closely resembled the concept artwork that was made for it originally. The campfire scene is one of my personal favourites, a lot for its lighting and the shadows that were cast, but also the campfire, which might seem a little odd. Rather than making real fire, I wanted to make stylised fire so that it would fit with the environment. And the way I did it was with really simple flat geometry, 3 pieces of the same shape overlapped, and then to create the 3D effect I just copied what I had and turned it 90 degrees, sort of incorporating paper cutout slots. And it worked brilliantly, and I was extraordinarily surprised at how simple things could be. Another aspect I wanted to give motion to was hair, in particular Morrigan's braid. Just like the hag's cloak, I had to paint parts of the braid to make sure it didn't collapse at the top where it was quite chunky. To complete the sense of motion, Maya has the ability to simulate materials, so I ended up using thick leather to create a nice heavy drop with no stretching in the braid. The only issue with using the thick leather as the braid's material is when Morrigan moves her head at speed, and the braid appears to be made out of rubber and bending quite strangely. Fortunately you can't really see this, and she doesn't move her head at that speed very often. While Morrigan's braid was very successful, the hag was not. I wanted her hair to bounce along with her walk cycle, but no matter how much I painted it, it didn't quite work. When it was painted, it was solid. When it wasn't painted, it just dropped or it freaked out. And occasionally I'd forget to attach it all together.
Suddenly, Morrigan's mind was flooded with visions of war. One awful image turned Morrigan's veins to ice. Her handsome love was doomed to die.
If there's one thing about my production that does make me wince, it has to be the treetop hill scene. I've always felt it was the most underdeveloped environment. I always meant to go back and change that if I ever got the chance.
Morrigan made a decision. She would save the warrior.
Conversely, the next scene, the aerial view of the crow flying, was actually one of my most successful scenes, and the most striking. But what makes it special for me is the fact that it's comprised of some really simple elements, and it almost felt like a cheat. So to begin with, the environment is actually about 90% planar shapes, except for the huts, of course. The trees were simply cutouts, which create the really nice shadow effects. The cluster of warriors you see are actually clones of just one fully rigged warrior who was animated with a really simple walk cycle. Then the smoke was an effect that Maya could produce fairly easily with a little tweaking in order to have the stylisation that I needed. The funny part about this illusion is the Godzilla-like nature of the crow over the warriors. I had to play with the scale a bit and make the crow absolutely enormous to fit the scene. When I first attempted to animate a fight sequence, I thought it'd have to be one long complicated shot with even more complicated choreography for the characters. But the scene came together much better with a sequence of quick cuts of simpler actions from a multitude of angles with alternating colour schemes.
And fell. Morrigan had done it. She had changed the warrior's fate.
The sequence following the barbarian's death is a section that evolved a lot in post. It's a scene that had to convey a lot of conflicting emotions with some very minimalistic faces and a lot of body language. So in the beginning I felt it was necessary to sort of spoon-feed the entire story in mime. But with continuous editing, the story got a little better every single time. Previously there was a version where you'd see the warrior physically slip before he fell, but there was no real need for it, and so it was cut from the final sequence. Much like the warriors in the aerial scene, the crows were actually clones of one animated alpha. So this alpha, as I've called it, had a short flap sequence of about 11 to 12 frames. Using particular tools, Maya sort of commits the sequence to memory, ready for emitting clones on a larger scale. So for the Hills of the Dead scene and the barbarian attack scene, I created a point in space for the crows to be emitted from, and created a second point for the crows to gravitate towards and orbit around. For the more complex crow movements seen in the beginning and at the end of the film, the crows follow a curved line. The rings around the main path controlled how widely the cluster of crows would fly, rather than one by one down the path. You can see the rings change in size and narrow towards Morrigan's position in the world. This was partially to make sure the crows didn't glitch through the ground plane, but also to make sure that they were quite dense when they swirled around her and hid her from view. And then I made the rings wider as they flew further away so that they spread in a more realistic fashion.
Once, centuries ago, there lived a beautiful woman. Those who glimpsed her spoke of a woman.
So now you know how exactly I made the sequence work as you see the crows take Morrigan away for the final time. Thank you for joining me on this commentary. I hope you enjoyed it.